Jamieson Smith, Shetland wool brokers. My name is Oliver, and this is completely new to me, so I hope you can understand what I'm trying to get across. Here at Jamieson Smith, we handle about 80% of the Shetland wool clip, roughly for 600 crofters and farmers. I started with this company in 1967 for the summer of '67, so it's been a long summer. What I'm going to talk about is Shetland wool and what we do here with the wool, and a bit about the sheep. To understand Shetland wool, we have to know a bit about the sheep. When we look at the old surveys done on Shetland sheep, one of the first ones was published in 1814 by John Sharif. He did a survey for the Edinburgh Agricultural Group. I forget the correct name, but it is a general overview on agriculture. The section on wool, it says in there that there was two types of sheep in Shetland. There was the Perry fine wool sheep, and there was a Scandinavian type sheep. The Scandinavian sheep, or as we call it, it's still a Shetland nowadays, but what they call it is similar to the spell sow and veal sow, possibly brought, or most likely brought over with the Vikings when they settled here in the 8th and 9th century. So I'll just show you the examples of the two here. This one, the Scandinavian type, you can see the long staple, the guard here. It's got an outer coat which runs the water and the weather off, and underneath there is a softer undercoat. It's very, very soft. The colour of this sheep, the fleece actually today looks blue or grey, and this is just your native Shetland. The wool I'm using today is for the island of Yell, and it's what we call Perry Shetland, and that's small Shetland. The Shetland is the smallest of the British breeds of sheep and most famous for the wool. The wool clip in the olden days, going back 100 years or further, the wool clip was the main cash crop to the crofter. The crofters mainly were crofter fishermen, like my family was, and they didn't make a lot of money. They worked for the laird and the boats and the sixereens going after the fishing. So the extra income and the crofts weren't big. The extra income came for the lady of the croft. And they would take the fine wood, Shetland, hand spin it and knit it into shawls, scarves and lace. They had a very good marketplace going back 100, 200 years ago. They had the Hanseatic merchants. The Dutch bought an awful lot of lace, and the Germans. So it was much sought after. So we'll concentrate on the spell sow to start off with. This, as I say, I've seen fleece like this in Norway, and this has got a super handle, but it's of mixed quality. This one here, this is Perry Shetland, and I fondly say that this is the original Shetland. Our archaeologists say that there's evidence of a fine-wooled sheep in Shetland, similar to the Soye sheep. It was a Perry sheep, and this is a Perry small Shetland, and it's got very fine wool. So what I say, there's two distinct types of Shetland sheep. This is the real Shetland, the bigger, longer guard hair Shetland was brought over with the Norwegians when they came to settle. That's maybe not strictly the case, but it's a good story. So what we have here is the fine Shetland. When we go back to the first survey, there was between 60 and 80,000 sheep in the islands. Most of them were coarse-wooled, resembling the Scandinavian breeds. But the fine wool, and the word kindly is used, and kindly is the fine, the staple. That was used, as I said before, by the crofter's wife to spin into a fine yarn. So in that report it distinctly says the wool is of mixed quality. So that leads into why do we grade, why do we sort, and this is about wool awareness and grading and sorting. And so what I'm going to do is show, hopefully, how we grade and how we sort wool. So we've two types, and it's of mixed quality. So when we come to grade wool, on the mainland, in the UK mainland, we have the producers there. Incidentally, the Shetland isn't in the wool marketing board, so we have to market the wool ourselves. And we do it a different way. On the mainland, they roll the fleece with the inside out. In Shetland, the crofter shows us his wool, and hopefully you can see this. Down at this end, you can see the guard here, and it's going right up the side. You can still see that pronounced hair there, and the beautiful soft underwool. That's the new wool there, but that's the underwool. So what we have, if we were to roll it the way the wool marketing board does it, we would see that we wouldn't see the unevenness in the staple length. So that's what the crofter has to do. He has to wrap or roll the fleece. That's the back end. So he folds in the sides and rolls from the back to the neck. And what you find in a lot of cases with Shetland is the fine wool is around the neck and the shoulders. I'll just show you in a minute. So here we have the difference. This is a longer guard here, and this is finer. And this guard here is going right up the sides. And there's a different length of staple, but that's beautiful up around the neck and shoulders. And as I said in the report, it says it's of mixed quality. So it's important for the crofter or the farmer to roll his wool and show us the neck and the shoulders if possible. And his grades can vary greatly by showing the fine wool. Because when we come to grade, and that's the bit I'm going to go on to now, we handle over 80% of the wool clip in Shetland, and this time of year we're grading 3,000–4,000 kilos a day, and everybody wants to get their wool away at one time, so we're really busy. So they show us the wool rolled up. If not, and it's all mixed up, it's more difficult for us. So the grading system was set up in 1978, and it's a grading system that works. is 5 grades of white, and we start off with the number 1 grade, or what I call the superfine. And this here is the superfine fleece. Remember, when we're grading, we can't open up each fleece. We have to look like this. And you can see the staple length there, and that fibre fineness, that's superb. The handle of the wool, the Shetland wool, even that rougher fleece, the handle sets it apart from any other imitation Shetland. The handle of the wool is key. The colour of this wool, as I said, this is off Ad Island yellow. It's what my old boss would call blue whin. It's that blue tinge, and that's caused, and you can see here, that's caused by the sheep grazing in the peat and heather hills. And that actually helps, along with the fine wool breeding, it helps the handle. And that is a superb fleece, and that's a superfine. And it is the same right through it. This sadly is getting to be less and less. There's less people going into crofting. They get no price for their Pirihal lamb. They get more for the wool than they get for the lamb. And in my time working here, I would never have believed that a fleece is worth more than a Hill Shetland lamb. But that's a different story. So we're superfine. We now go into our grade 1. And the grade 1 is still an excellent wool. It's getting a bit bigger. We've got to take a quick decision on this. And there you go. You're starting to see a bit of the guard hair coming in. Okay, that's the hips, but the hips are getting a bit big. It's getting a bit chunkier, and it's not got the style. The style is the crimp. That beautiful crimp. And the crimp is like the corrugations there. And this one is not so defined. It's more open. But that is a grade 1 and still a very good wool. Grade 2, and I think you can see the difference here. Grade 2 is still a really good wool, but it's getting a bit chunkier and bigger in the staple. It's not coarse, but it's just a bulkier fleece. There's even more guard here showing through. And this is what you have to decide when you're grading. You have to go, what's your standards? Because when we grade the wool, we have to be fair towards the producer, the crofter, the farmer, but we also have a responsibility to the buyer of the wool. In our case, we sell most of our wool to our parent company, and so they have to know the standard that we are grading to. And that standard, as I say, was set in 1978. My memory is right. And we still stick to that standardized grading, and that's very, very important. So you can see that one's getting a bit bigger. But it's still a really good handle. Okay. Grade 3. Grade 3 is still, the handle of that is good, but you can see even more of the long pointed staple, the guard hair. It's getting a bit bigger and bulkier. And we don't spend this amount of time when we're grading. You just have to take a split decision through it. This, I'm putting a bit of time onto this, but that one, the handle is getting that bit chunkier and bulkier, but it's still a very good wool. Grade 3. grade 4, and this is pretty Shetland here. And this is similar to the one I opened up with. This is like the spell sow and the veil sow of Scandinavia. And this is just a pretty Shetland. And you can see the guard here. Over the centuries, and since 1927, the formation of the flock book. The flock book, their aim was to preserve the fine Shetland, the real Shetland. There are a lot of crossbreds coming in with the clearances in the late 1800s. And so the flock book was set up to protect the Shetland. And they, to this day, they're classers of the sheep. When they pass the sheep at the shows and sales, they look for fine wool. That's one of the main points in the flock book. So they've done an excellent job at preserving fine wool Shetland. So that's for grade 4. So I'm saying grade 1, 2, 3, and 4, and at the top of the chain was the superfine. Okay, so we now move on to the coloured wool. There's not an awful lot of coloured wool in Shetland now. There's roughly about 15,000 kilos. And again, it's a mixed quality. So I'll deal with the colours first. The coloured wool, we have the murret, moorride, murret, and it can be light murret through to a dark ginger murret. And that is the murret. And the Shetland black. When I first came here, we had a jet black. The black now has gone more like a dark brown, unfortunately. It's got browner as time has gone on. This is the greys. We have a dark grey, and we have a lighter grey and a medium grey. So basically, it's 5 main colours, although there's roughly 30 different mixtures of colours. And that's what we call the branding. Okay, so we use that one. We have only got 3 grades of coloured. This one here is a cat mugget. And this is our superfine. And we can set them all together. The superfine, similar to the white, is a very fine fibre. And it's reasonably strong, and it's got a good handle. Again, this is getting very, very scarce. Less people breeding coloured Shetland because they get a poor price for the lamb. But this, you can see, has got the style, the crimp, and it's got a very good handle. So that's our superfine. We use this in our fine lace yarns, our heritage yarns, our supreme lace. And this is a fine colour. It's still a good wool, but it's getting a lot blunter in the staple. It's a bit chunkier. It's not got the handle this is. And so that's our fine colour. This one here is very interesting. We don't see a lot of this nowadays. This is rough colour. And hopefully you can see this. See the distinct mane down the back. And the old people used to tell me that that was scadder. when they rued or plucked the wool off the sheep in the olden days, this black line would remain. And it was always that bit coarser even as the side there. And that is scadder, and this is a rough colour. When I was over in Norway 4 years ago, I saw a fleece, the neighbour of this. So that's the connection with your cousins across the water. So that's a really good example of a scadder fleece. And they're getting less and less. So the grading, it's very time-taking. We have to have a booking system, and we have to watch. We get inundated with clips, especially this year with the lockdown, the crofters and farmers. A plus to that, they're being home, because most of the crofters now aren't full-time, they've got other jobs. And so they're being shearing earlier. So the grading system has the 5 main grades of white, 3 main grades coloured. But we also have other grades. And this grades are very important, because this one here is excess peat, excess pit. And that's the rub in here. This fleece, you can see, this fleece here is felted with pit moor. Why is this? We've had really exceptionally fine weather, and so the sheep rub into the pit banks to escape for the heat. And when it's a downpouring, they rub under the banks for shelter, and so you can see the amount of pit moor that's in here. I can remember our old spinner and hunters of Brora told us that you could lose half the fleece weight, and you can see by the table here, you can see the amount of peat that's come out of that. So this goes into another grade. I think we don't use the word probably damage, but this goes in as excess peat. The reason why that is because this takes a lot of effort to scour. There's another method that has to be introduced at that stage to remove a lot of this. But this is a true pitty Shetland, and if you can see the table, that's the pit moor. Okay, so that is one of the, we would get a fault grade. It's not really the fault of the producer, the crofter, the farmer. It's just environment the sheep is in. So I say they're less and less whole sheep. The real good Shetland comes off the heathery hills, and I have a special connection to Yell. Our daughter went against the grain. She's bought a croft up in Yell, and her partner are now gone into crofting when everybody else seems to be going into it. So this sheep here, there's a light murret, and you can see it's like a fawn. And this sheep here is what my old boss called a bank sheep. A bank sheep is a sheep that would escape into the cliffs. And areas like Conisborough, they had a big problem in the steep cliffs to the west. This sheep would disappear into the cliffs. They couldn't get dogs down to get them out. And this fleece here is actually 3 years growth. So this here is to go into a damaged grade, And this is and you can't smell it obviously, but this has also got a lot of cades. Cades is, it's not like a sheep tick. And this pink Y here, yins, and the smell is quite serious. I'm sure my friend here can smell this. This fleece has also got another fault, and this fault is very important. When the fleece are rolled, some people could actually leave the dags on. Can you see the dags? That could weigh up to 1 kilo. That is really serious. We don't get so much nowadays, but in the first years of the grading, I often would find dags wrapped up inside the fleece. It adds a bit of weight, but people understand that that's not really got a value nowadays, and that is really, it needs to be turned off when the shearer is clipping. I can imagine how difficult it would have been for the shearer to shorten this. 3 years growth. So that, we don't get an awful lot of it because there's not so much hill wool, but that is a problem. And again, it's not the fault of the crofter. And this is one here. It's the marking on the sheep. The official name for this is keel. And it's all right if that keel, you can see the amount here, that's just a bit excessive. The next stage of the processing, and I'll be dealing with that, this has to be taken out by hand. Machine can't take this out. Okay, this is washable. It's a bit excessive, so it might take a bit of extra work to wash this out. But that there is excessive. A spot on the back end or around the neck would have been enough, but not right down the rig. So that is a fault grade. So when we're working with the keel, we also, nowadays, I can see something happening that I thought we gotten rid of in the olden days. There weren't many marking pencils or whatever. People used to put on paint, ordinary paint, household paint. And this marker here, this is a marker, but this marker can't wash out very well, and it's totally matted into the fleece. And we get this quite a lot. Two of the guys I work with say that this is cattle marking, and this isn't good for wool. This, when we go to the next stage, which I'll show you, this has to be removed, and we are finding quite a bit of this. And that just doesn't, you can hear it. You're having to tear it apart. So that whole bit has to be turned out, and that goes in to another fault grade. This one again, this is just an interesting bit of Shetland. This is no fault of the crofter, the farmer. This is called the cot, matted, felted. And it's got some good wool in it, but you cannot break it. So that would have to go into our grade 4, that one. So the grading is very important. It's a much fairer system for everybody concerned, the grading. In 1978, when it was introduced, it changed things. Prior to that, we bought the wool on the previous year's report and price. So if the market fluctuated, if it went up or down, we would just look up the report and adjust it. And maybe it wasn't totally fair to everybody, but the grading system works. I'll now move on to the next part of our process, and that is sorting. And why do we sort? So I've dealt with the grading of the wool. The next stage is sorting wool. Sorting wool is probably the key to producing a real Shetland yarn. It completely sets itself apart from other so-called Shetland. You have the super soft handle, but in order to get it just right, you have to sort, and that's the graded fleece there. So what you have to do now is hand sort. In 1967, when I came here for the summer of '67, I was going to be paid off, and my late boss, Sheepy, decided to keep me on the farm and also sort wool. So this here is a very good example of why we sort. And you can see the guard hair here. If you've done a hand sort, you see the hair. You're going to get an itchy, abrasive yarn. Okay, you've got underneath, and going back in time, the crofter's wife would try to dehair that. But if you didn't attack that out, if you were to fire that fleece into a spinning frame, it would be itchy. So it needs a lot of work. And I'm basically just going to do hand sorting like a hand spinner would do. We have a select way, Jamieson Smith, that we sort wool, and that's our trade secret. And I'm not going to show that off. But I'm just going to sort the fleece and hopefully show you how to do this. Mist hand spinners, they know about sorting. So if we go down to this end, to the hips, to the back end, and I'm just going to sort this, we look at the depth of the guard here. And hopefully you can pick this up. That's quite a long staple, probably 4 inch longer. And we do the same here. Sorting wool is very time consuming. And we look at up the side, and you can still see guard here. It's very, very soft, this wool, but you have a cut off where you know how much guard hair you can let through. And there's the keel. So when we're sorting, if you recollect the grades, then we have to tack that out, and that's the keel, and that goes into a separate sort. It's some of the other excessive peat, and that goes into a different sort. Okay, so we're going even up the sides here. There's still an amount of the guard here. It's just a question of looking. Okay, I would normally go a bit quicker as this. Your employer wants you to work flat out and get as much done as you possibly can. It's only natural, but you can't rush this job. If you rush it and you get your sort rang, you might as well do what others do and just throw it in and catch Shetland. So hopefully we should see the difference here. You just have to check the guard here. You can let a certain amount through, but this stuff here is quite excessive. So it's a question of, I suppose, kenning your wool and kenning how it can fit into what yarn you're after. So out of this fleece, which will weigh less than a kilo, we have that amount. So it's mostly guard here. Okay, that goes into a different use, but this goes into your finer blind. So you can see the difference here. I suppose this would be a couple 100 grams, and this will come out. So sorting is something that we spend a lot of time on. It's the key to producing a real Shetland yarn. And if you don't do that, you're not going to get the right results. The same applies to the coloured wool. We sort the coloured wool. But what we do with the coloured wool in the case of the flacket, that's flacket is when you get spots, a colour like murret black on a lighter colour. You have to physically separate that different colours for the rest, and that's very time consuming. This fleece here, the superfine colour, there's not much guard here shown. You can see the point of the staple there. It's not really a hair. The chap that learnt me to start off with, he called that the bird's beak. You can see the point. It's not really a hair as such, but that's an exceptionally fine one. And there's not much of the way rough there. So if all the wool we bought was like this, the wool sorter would have an easier life. Okay, that's the sorting. So thank you very much for watching and listening. And I hope you've learned a bit about what we're about at Jamieson Smiths, Shetland Wool Brokers. And I've explained some of the points in getting a real Shetland yarn. And if you could look at some of the other classes that we've had on, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much.